Hi everybody, my name is Jeremy Siskind. I'm a jazz pianist. I'm the author of books about jazz piano. Some say the best books about jazz piano. I've got my Jazz Piano Fundamentals series. I've got playing solo jazz piano. And today I'm talking about Brad Mehldau, who I am just such a fan of. He's been such an influence, inspiration. He's given me so much joy through his music. And you'll find quite a bit about Brad Mehldau's style in both playing solo jazz piano and Jazz Piano Fundamentals Book 3, which is about modal and modern jazz. And so I've been thinking about Brad Mehldau's contributions, and I am very much of the opinion that he is the most influential jazz musician of the past 30 or 40 years. I think you could make your case for Robert Glasper, but I think Mehldau takes it. And I have these 4 reasons why. I want to share them with you and play some piano for you and kind of demonstrate some of these things. So let's go on a little journey together. So 4 reasons why Brad Mehldau is how he changed the game. So the first one is odd meters. Okay, Brad Mehldau certainly didn't invent playing in odd meters. In the jazz tradition, we can trace that back to the Dave Brubeck album Time Out, but certainly a lot of other musicians. John McLaughlin comes to mind as somebody who played in odd meters. Some Dave Holland stuff is in odd meters. He's not at all the first one, but to me, he and his trio are the reason why it is like at this point every jazz musician knows how to play in odd meters, particularly 5 and 7. And one of the reasons is that Brad Mehldau, I think more than anybody else, mastered the art of putting standards into odd time signatures. And this was a little bit different than writing original tunes in odd meters, coming up with something really complicated, Frank Zappa-esque that's moving from all these different time signatures. But Mehldau takes all the things you are and he just transitions it to 7. And he does this with all of these different tunes. If you check out this book, this third book of Jazz Piano Fundamentals, there's a transcription project for the tune I Didn't Know What Time It Is, which he plays in 5/4. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so on one hand, he's taking these standards and putting them into odd meters. And on the other hand, he's also just a master and so fluid in these different time signatures. And certainly a lot of credit goes to Larry Grenadier and Jorge Rossi and later Jeff Ballard. But I think particularly that trio with Larry Grenadier and Jorge Rossi, like they just move so slick in such a slick manner through different time signatures. And I wasn't planning on doing this, but you know what? This is a very spontaneous channel. I'm going to show you a little bit of Jazz Piano Fundamentals Book 3, where I demonstrate and talk about how to put these tunes into odd meters, because that's what a lot of the last quarter of the book is about. But I didn't plan for this, so I'm going to try to find it really fast, and this is going to be really entertaining YouTube channel content. It's going to be me going through my book. All right, found it. So here's this is in Unit 11. It's called Playing Tunes in Odd Meters. And what this is showing you, and you're probably not going to master it in this short time, but it's basically showing that when you play a tune in 4/4, like All the Things You Are, you have 4 beats per measure. I know you have to come to YouTube to find that out. But these odd meters, whether it's 7 or whether it's 5, have 4 pulses per measure, okay, using these claves. And I teach you all about what the common claves are for 5 and for 7. And so once you know that, it's not really that crazy to transition from 4 beats to 4 pulses. So instead of da 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 da, we get or and as long as the melody is not too complicated, it's not actually that difficult to do this. So Mehldau plays all of these tunes in odd meters and makes playing 7 part of what any young jazz musician is expected to do. And these days, I think largely thanks to Mehldau's influence, if you're on a gig, it is not that crazy that somebody would say, let's play a tune in 5 or let's play a tune in 7. The second big thing is repertoire. Again, Brad Mehldau certainly did not invent taking popular tunes and putting them into the standard repertoire or using them in place of standards. One example that comes to mind is Miles Davis playing Time After Time. Certainly not the only example, but that's a really interesting example, because who would think that Miles Davis would be playing Cyndi Lauper, right? But Brad Mehldau, I think, does this to such a great extent and chooses pieces, I think, far outside of what people normally would have chosen previously, that I think he really changed the game in this respect. And for a lot of musicians, I think this starts with Mehldau's version of Blackbird. It is, I think, as iconic of a jazz recording as you're going to find from the 90s and beyond. So Mehldau takes the Beatles tune Blackbird, and he really plays it quite literally. He doesn't really reharmonize it. There's some slightly different touches. And of course, this tune also is very metrically interesting if you've ever, learned it or studied it or know about it. And this recording, if you haven't heard it, is beautiful. And Mehldau plays a beautiful solo, which is both hip and understated and recognizes the original. And from this encounter with Blackbird, Mehldau chooses a lot of really unusual repertoire. And, Radiohead, I think, stands out as a band that Mehldau loves. And in his first few Art of the Trio records, there's often a Radiohead piece on the albums. Mehldau also is really interested in Paul Simon and plays 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover in a really interesting way. He chooses different tunes from the Beatles repertoire, like She's Leaving Home and Martha My Dear. And, I think previously, a lot of artists who might cover pop tunes were seen as somewhat selling out. Maybe they were choosing the most popular song at the time. But Mehldau is choosing these somewhat obscure, somewhat really hip tunes, and there's no real question that he loves this music. He plays the Beach Boys. He loves the Beach Boys. In fact, the one time I got to meet him, he was talking about how he's playing the Beach Boys for his kids and really enjoying sharing that music with them. And then he, in more recent years, he's done some maybe even more off the wall things, like playing Wonderwall by Oasis. But always doing it, and this is part of what makes him special, with almost the attitude of a rock and roll musician. And this is really important to Mehldau's whole ethos. He did grow up listening to rock and roll. He talks in interviews about a lot of the way he plays the piano as being influenced by the way the guitar is played. And we'll come back to that a little bit later. And he does play with Elliott Smith, with John Mayer, and he makes multiple albums with the producer John Bryan, who's associated with Fiona Apple and others. So he's, he comes by this very honestly, and he's not putting on any kind of a show. And he's made it really common for musicians to take pieces from the rock and pop repertoire and bring them into a jazz context. Number 3 is harmony. And this is it's an interesting one, because Mehldau certainly knows jazz harmony. There's a lot of jazz harmony. He's a master of jazz harmony. But he also takes these other two streams which kind of converge. He's really interested in the harmony of the late Romantics. I think Brahms is probably the person who he identifies with most. There's a song called John Boy, which is about Johannes Brahms. It's kind of... I don't remember the whole thing, but it starts like that. And so based on that, he's using a lot of more triadic harmony. But the other stream is coming more from the rock and pop world, which also uses more triadic harmony. But from that angle, you hear a lot of triads with the ninth. So that kind of add to sound in either major or minor. And a lot of Mehldau's harmony is also based in counterpoint rather than this kind of top-down 2-5-1 jazz harmony that we're so used to. I want to show you a couple things using this tune called Resignation, which I transcribed when I was in college. And this is a lead sheet I made for it. And you're going to see it starts with this G minor add 2. And we have more classical moments, like this is a very classical style suspension. Right, and you can even see this is like, this is very classical chorale style. I'll play this for you quite literally. Even this A flat chord, right? This idea of the flat 2, the Neapolitan, is very common in classical music. So even though that's a very colorful chord, it's not outside of that classical realm. The bridge is so beautiful. Right. So we have this real feeling of these classical triads, and again, I wasn't planning for this, but I can pivot really quickly, I think. In this tune, 29 Palms, he also is using a lot of triads, but maybe we could think this is coming more or as much from a pop tradition. It's definitely less obviously classical than Resignation. But we have these different views on jazz harmony. Not everything is a chord with a 13th. Not everything is in the Bill Evans, harmonic landscape. Just a side note about Brad Mehldau and Bill Evans. Apparently early in his career, a lot of critics were comparing him to Bill Evans because he was this harmonic master and he was white. And Mehldau wrote this really scathing response in one of the liner notes to one of the Art of the Trio records, basically saying, like, I'm not that influenced by Bill Evans. My influences come from other places. Just because I'm a white jazz pianist, don't compare me to Bill Evans, which I think is interesting. Okay, so then the fourth thing is pianism. So Mehldau does a lot with the left hand. Okay, his left hand is so much more and equal to his right hand than so many other pianists. He plays a lot of melodies in his left hand. Like one really classic thing that you'll hear him doing is playing some kind of an ostinato figure in the right hand and then a melody. Right, or sometimes just singing on. Again, he's not the first person to do this. Phineas Newborn plays a ton of melodies in his left hand. But Mehldau just takes this to another level. But the thing that I'm a little bit more interested is that he's so fluid moving in between his right and his left hands. And I've really studied and enjoy his perpetual motion style, which you can particularly hear in his solo piano playing. And looking again at that tune Resignation, I got to get back there now. My transcription's on pen and paper, so I have somebody else's transcription that I just downloaded here. But it's good enough. Good enough for now. he's moving so smoothly between his right and his left hand that every eighth note is being covered. And this pattern that he's forming is almost more like a guitar, like a Spanish guitar sort of a thing. And so he integrates these multiple parts so seamlessly. And I want you to be able to see my hands as I do this, because which hand is playing what really matters here. But it's the beautiful integration of the hands that makes Mehldau so unique. Sorry. So good at keeping these flowing eighth notes going, but having a lot of texture, because some of it's happening in the left hand and some of it's happening with the right hand. And this has been a really big influence on other modern pianists, including certainly me. So those are 4 reasons why I think Brad Mehldau is an incredibly important pianist. You've got your odd meters, you got your repertoire, you got your harmony, and you got your pianism. I think he was a game changer in all 4 areas. So again, if you're interested in learning about perpetual motion, I've got a bunch about that in Playing Solo Jazz Piano. If you want to know more about the metrical changes, I've got a bunch about that in Jazz Piano Fundamentals Book 3. So check those out if you're interested. I appreciate you watching. Let's see, if you watched this far, say something about resignation or resigning. All right, bye.